What's up, everybody, and welcome to this week's episode of the Well Man's Podcast. My name is Brian Brosey. I'm joined by my friend and co-host Keoni Tita. Keoni, how are you today?
I'm doing good. I probably need more sleep after some of the latest reading I've been doing. So we're going to talk about sleep
Perfect.
today. And I would have to say, after looking at some of the research and some of the studies that are coming out, some of the latest stuff right now, sleep is probably the most important thing you can do for your health.
Yeah, I
I
would
would
agree.
put that above eating and exercise.
So maybe breathing in front of it, and that's it.
Yeah, breathing will probably be yeah. So what we know is, what is it? A vast majority, up to at least 2/3 of adults throughout developed countries fail to maintain the appropriate amount of sleep. When I say appropriate amount of sleep, we're talking about 8 hours nightly.
Okay. So that's our recommended dose, Keoni, is that 8
Yeah, it's
hours?
between 7.5 to up to 9 hours of sleep. Is a good thing to try to get.
Yeah.
Routinely, we as Americans, we sleep a lot less than that. We sleep between 6 or 7 hours a night, and that has really, really devastating consequences for our overall health. So we're talking about insufficient sleep as being closely linked to dementia and Alzheimer's. Just moderate sleep reductions disrupt blood sugar, create a pre-diabetic state, definitely influence diabetes, contributes to that, contributes to all psychiatric conditions, including depression, anxiety, suicide. I mean, you name it, without getting enough sleep. Increases coronary artery disease, increases the likelihood of coronary arteries being blocked, congestive heart failure. We've talked about this before on other podcasts about how sleep dysregulates your appetite and can make you overeat. Too little causes increase in the hunger hormone called ghrelin. Ghrelin is like that growl hormone, the hunger hormone that makes you want to eat.
Yeah, I've been there, and I've eaten the worst foods because of it. Something
Yeah,
about
right.
staying up late at night makes you want a
And
Pop-Tart.
and and guess why? One of the reasons why you do eat the worst foods is because you make impulsive decisions because you haven't gotten enough sleep, according to the research. Right.
Yeah.
So you will just eat, you'll just eat without really thinking about it.
Right.
And then it suppresses your other hormone. So it increases hunger hormone and suppresses your satiating hormone, leptin. So Western society, and I've heard this before. You've heard that old saying, I'll sleep when I'm dead. Like,
Yes.
life's too short. I'll sleep when
Shout
I'm
out to
dead.
2 Chainz. He's got a whole song about it. I know you
Does he?
listen to 2 Chainz, Keoni.
Oh, okay. Yeah, 2 Chainz, one of my favorite. No, I have no idea who that is, but where I heard that. Where I heard that saying. I actually heard that on. When did I hear that? Oh, I'm sorry, I'm getting a call. Let me just delete that.
It was 2 Chainz.
All right, so
It's
so
calling to
I
tell you
where I
sleep when
heard
you die.
it. There was a movie with Patrick Swayze in it. I think it was called Roadhouse. His friend said that I'll sleep when I'm dead. I'll get enough sleep when I'm dead. Well, the problem with that is that if you don't sleep, you will be dead sooner than you want to be, much
Yeah.
sooner.
Right.
So that's pretty bad. And then also our Western lifestyle, right, kind of promotes that
It does.
non-sleep thing, right? If you sleep too much, you're considered lazy. The rhythm of the Western life, get up early, start work, come home, sit in front of TV all day, watch news, get stressed out, stay up late, and repeat that cycle. Hence, you get 6 to 7 hours, if you're lucky, which is a lot less than you need,
Yeah.
as we were saying. So the World Health Organization actually declared sleep a epidemic in industrialized nations, where it's a big health concern, and it's a huge financial burden on society. People who don't sleep. I mean, think about everything it does according to what it does for your overall health, right? So talk about the healthcare costs. And then we can even talk about, lack of sleep. There's indications that lack of sleep is worse than drunk driving. And So we'll talk about that in a little bit and what that can do as far as causing accidents and all kinds of problems and unwanted injuries and deaths.
Yeah, and I mean we've all felt this before. I know I've driven when I should not have been driving after being super tired or driving throughout the night, and you darn near hallucinate once or twice kind of going down the road.
Right. That's exactly right. And I've done that myself. And what they're saying is, I think what one person dies in a traffic accident every hour in the U.S. due to fatigue-related errors.
Wow.
Um, and it's worse than driving under the influence of alcohol and drugs. It's a bigger health concern than that. So that's huge.
Right.
That's huge. And the other interesting thing about it is, Brian, is what people don't realize: when you don't sleep, your body will force you to sleep. So what happens is sometimes when these people, like, think about the truck driver who's trying to get his payload to a certain place and is not getting enough sleep. What will actually happen? Your brain will actually go into micro sleeps, like 2 to 3 seconds, where you have no idea you're actually sleeping at the wheel. And this has caused numerous accidents. So sleep is really, really important, not only for truck drivers, but anybody on the road, airline pilots, and that type of thing. And we also know by a rare disease called fatal familial insomnia that not getting sleep can kill you. So much so that the Guinness Book of World Records does not want people trying, will not even take your sleep record, your lack of sleep record, and put it in there, because they know the devastating effects it does to the brain. And that is at any age. So,
wow.
Right.
That's interesting. I'm going to go for the world record of most sleep.
That would be that, and that's what we should strive for. Exactly. That's what we should strive for.
It'll be me and a grizzly bear right up there next to each other.
Yeah, right. Well, that again, the old adage, right? Get your beauty sleep. There's a lot to be said for that. I mean, it is significantly anti-aging. It prolongs life.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we've all gone through, like, especially now, Keoni, I've felt working where and I work a PRN job, an as needed job. So I may go through 4 or 5 days of straight work, and then maybe I won't have work for a while. And that I can really, on the 5th day, you're exhausted, you're slow, you're definitely moving slower, you're not as quick on your feet. And it all compounds. I mean, we've all been there.
Right. And it is so important. And that's why, we talked earlier, this is why we've done a number of sleep podcasts, and I want to do a 3 to 4 part series with this one. So we're going to continue talking about it. But getting back to that, we know that sleep will actually kill you, and it can kill you within, what do they say? Like up to, with this familial fatal insomnia, there's no cure for that. And you can die within months of getting that. And usually this happens later on in life, and it's a genetic disorder, and there's nothing you can do about it if you have this genetic disorder. And so think about how devastating that is, Brian. Think about, like, you're in your, I don't know, 40s or 50s, and all of a sudden you have insomnia, right? And you think, oh, well, it's not a big deal. I'm going to go see my doctor about it. And you take sleep medications or whatever, and then nothing works. And then slowly but surely you see the damaging effects of what sleep does. Following people like this, you see what it does to the brain, where they can't even function after a while, and it ends up killing them because they cannot sleep anymore.
And for this situation, the medications don't work, or
nothing works. Nothing works. There's no cure for it. Nothing works for it. But getting back to medications, it's a shame, because in our country, what do we do to help us sleep?
Take a little candy.
Yeah, we give out medications, and that's part of the reason why I want to do this podcast with you, because we're going to talk about, at the end of our series, and you'll get the hints as we go through this, of non-pharmacological ways to improve your sleep.
Yeah, looking forward to that.
So this is really interesting as we go through this. All animals tested to date need sleep. And this kind of says something about the evolutionary need for sleep and how it's extremely important. There is not one organ in the body that is not optimally enhanced by sleep. And this is from all the research to date that we know. Within the brain, we know that sleep improves the capacity to learn, memorize, make logical decisions, choices, improves psychological health, recalibrates our emotional brain circuits. Think about when you don't get sleep, Ryan, and somebody says something to piss you off. Are you going to be more likely to get in their face and, start going off? Or are you going to be more likely to be like, okay, I'm going to take a step back, take a few breaths and not take it personal.
Oh, the big fingers
Think
are coming
about,
out.
right. But it allows you to be emotionally calm when under stress. It allows you to make appropriate decisions when under stress. It allows you not to overeat when under stress.
Right.
And the list goes on and on. So it just allows you to keep your composure when faced with psychological challenges. Very interesting thing, within the body, what it does, we talked about this just to reiterate it. It reinforces the immune system. So talk about preventing cancer here, prevents infections. One of the best ways I think that we can fight viral illnesses like this COVID is getting plenty of sleep, which we don't talk about. It optimizes glucose, controls impulsivity, rash behavior, like we were talking about. One thing that I find very interesting about that, Jillian finds she's, Jillian, my wife, who talks a lot about the gut microbiome. Sleep actually helps support the gut microbiome, which also affects your immune system. It lowers your blood pressure, makes for a healthy heart. It's, as we said, more important than than diet and exercise. So not many biological functions that do not benefit from sleep.
Yeah.
So with that being said, sleep is important. It's one of the most important things that we can do. We should get more of it, and we should try to get as much of it as we can. And I would even include that in napping, with the one exception. If you are napping and it affects your nighttime sleep, then that may be an issue. But so let's talk about, two of the things that really help control sleep. One is your circadian clock, and the other one is sleep pressure. All right. And so everybody's heard about their circadian rhythm.
Yeah.
And a lot of people, maybe if you travel overseas, you kind of gotten slapped in the face with this, so to speak, with jet lag. Especially older individuals are much more prone to it. I felt like when I traveled when I was younger, I wasn't as prone to it. But now when I travel east, going to Europe, I certainly feel it quite a bit. And it just makes you tired and miserable for a while. In fact, for every hour that you're off, it takes in. So for example, if you're traveling from the US to the UK, from the West Coast, that's like an 8-hour time difference. You get to the UK at 9 a.m., your brain and body still think you're on the West Coast time at 1 a.m. And so by the time you get there, you're exhausted, right? Because your body's think it's 1 a.m., but it's morning time. And the tiredness that occurs from that is jet lag. And it takes 1 hour each day to help reset that clock. So you should stay in the UK at least 8 days to help reset. But most people, what are they doing? They're heading back after a week or whatever, and they have to go back the other way. And it's always harder going east than going west, because when you go west, you're actually staying up later. It's the opposite of, it's actually like going to bed later. So you go to sleep easier when you head west. Right. So that's one of the things that can help. And jet lag is interesting because it's one of those things where melatonin can really help, and melatonin can help reset that rhythm. And we'll talk about that more in just a second, but I want to talk a little bit about sleep pressure. So sleep pressure is the other aspect beside the circadian clock that helps with sleep. And this is a buildup of a compound in your body called adenosine. And adenosine builds up during the day. And at the end of the day, what basically happens is that pressure builds, and it helps you go to sleep, right? The problem is adenosine is completely taken off its receptors or blocked from these adenosine receptors throughout your body by caffeine. And so this is where one of the things that we do in our clinic is really talk about caffeine and sleep pressure. So you can mute the adenosine effects, that sleep pressure, with caffeine. And as we know, caffeine is one of the most widely abused psychoactive substances on the planet. It's the highest traded commodity besides oil on the planet. In the Western world, most people drink it. In fact, some people start drinking it in their childhood, and it has awful consequences for your brain and for your sleep. So caffeine has a half-life of like 7 to 8 hours. So think about that. If you have let's say you have dinner and you have an espresso after dinner, right? Well, 50% of that is not going to be gone for another 7 or 8 hours. And if you're a slow metabolizer of caffeine, that completely affects your sleep, can affect your deep sleep and your what we call your NREM sleep and your REM sleep, which we'll talk about in just a minute. But caffeine is one of those first things that I do with my clients, is just like really talk to them about that. And even decaffeinated coffee, I mean, that still has caffeine in it. It's about 15 to 30% more, caffeine than a regular cup of coffee. But, it's still there. And guess what? It occupies those adenosine receptors. So therefore, it significantly inhibits your sleep. Very interesting study on this. I wish I had the pictures of this, but they did a study on spiders, and I know spiders are an insect, but besides being an insect, we know that all life forms that at least that were tested, including spiders, insects, even bacteria to some extent, have some form of restorative sleep, if you will, that they need to go through their life. And even with bacteria, we know that they need rest, and when they're more active during light. But getting back to the spider experiment, they actually put spiders and exposed them to LSD, speed, marijuana, and caffeine. And caffeine was the most discombobulated, ridiculous looking web that they spun when they're exposed to that compared to the others. So I find that interesting.
That is fascinating. Maybe the LSD spider did the Mona Lisa or something like that.
Yeah. But the one thing that we'll talk about quite a bit, speaking of things like Mona Lisa and creativity and stuff like that, and the spider spinning its web, sleep is the number one thing that you can do to express your creativity. Without appropriate sleep, you are not going to be a creative person. You're not going to be a motivated person. You're going to be an apathetic person, and you're going to be a depressed person. Yeah. So it's very important that we make sure that you do that. And another thing I just want to talk about, I don't know, have you ever experienced like a caffeine crash? Do you know what I'm talking about there? Where, you pull all-nighter, but you drink caffeine to stay up, So you're drinking the caffeine, and when your body finally metabolizes it all and you're up at 3 a.m, and then you just completely crash. And to get out of that crash, you have to dose yourself with caffeine again, right? But eventually the sleep pressure will eventually win out if you do that day after day. Unfortunately, a lot of college students do this thing. Mm-hmm. And it is the worst thing you can do for studying for exams. You're better off going to bed early, getting up and doing exams. If I had to go back and redo my life, I would not have pulled any all-nighters in college. I just wouldn't have done it, knowing what I know now. Because what they've shown with the research is these people just cannot, they just do not perform well on the tests. It's better to get sleep. And what happens during sleep is you start integrating everything you learned from that, and you can make better inferences and better guesses and hypotheses and things like that, and come up with more, logical answers to questions when you're confronted with them when you don't have sleep.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it was in high school, Keoni, I pulled an all-nighter for like a couple of AP tests or something like that the next day, and I got a 46. It was like the lowest test grade I ever got. And it was straight. It was just, you read the test over a week later or whatever the case may be, and you're like, what the hell was I thinking? Right. And it's like, that's what I was thinking. You were thinking, man, I hope that adenosine builds back up and I can go to sleep.
Right. You just can't, you cannot function. And think about it. Would you want a surgeon staying up all night that's getting ready to operate on you? Right. No, you would not. You wouldn't want an airline pilot up all night, or a truck driver for that matter, right? Which that's been a big issue. I think, in fact, what was it, like 2 or 3 years ago, where a truck driver completely, it happened down in Florida in your end, where a truck driver completely like hit this family that was in a van going like 70 miles an hour. He was asleep at the wheel. He went into a micro sleep and killed everybody in the van, and the van hit another car and killed people in that. And so it is one of these things where it really is, you know, again, if I was Surgeon General, besides putting everybody on magnesium, I would say everybody needs to sleep and
Yeah.
get plenty of it.
Yeah.
So it's one of those things that we just need to really take heed of.
Yeah. Speaking about kind of circadian rhythms, and let's just use the truck driver as an example, Keoni. What would you recommend to someone like that if they're, you're being realistic about probably some of that best driving time is that late evening, early morning type of driving time? What would you suggest with their sleep schedule? Can they take, a 3 or 4 hour nap in, rush hour traffic and then also get 4 or 5 hours of sleep at another point in the day and be evened out? Or is that not gonna, is the equation not add up properly
Well,
there?
I can say this based on what we know is that napping does help, can help, but it is not a cure all. Okay. So taking power naps can help, but eventually that sleep pressure will keep building up. All right. So it's not the answer. And you have to also take that truck driver and, there's one thing in sleep studies, what we know, it's based on what your chronotype is, and we call them owls and larks. Okay. And owls are people who basically tend to want to stay up late, and larks are people who function, go to bed early, get up early. And owls kind of are pushed forward. They go to bed late and need to get up late. Unfortunately, in our society, if you're an owl, you have an unfair advantage, right? Because most work things start at like 7 or 8. Think about school, having to get up early for it. And these people genetically go to bed late, and they're forced to get up early, and then they're chronically tired, and they're deemed by society a lot of times as just being lazy, when as genetically speaking, they still need the same amount of sleep as a lark does, but it's just pushed back a little bit. So that's a big thing to look at for who has who's driving a truck. Also, the pressure on the truck driver, that's something that needs to be done at a national level, where
Sure.
these people are only allowed to drive certain hours, and they need to be recommended, prescribed sleep, not sleep medications, appropriate natural ways to improve their sleep. But napping helps. It is not the cure-all. And it's one of those things that truck drivers really need to be aware of. I actually have a patients that they have that are truck drivers, and they're on the road constantly, back and forth from the West Coast to the East Coast. Like once, twice a week, every week, and they're a husband-wife team, and they just switch off the driving, and they make sure that they're doing their best with their sleep. But I had a long talk with them about this, because even that is not really optimal unless you're used to like sleeping in a truck, and you can make sure that you get the light out of the truck when you are sleeping, especially the person who is sleeping during the day hours, where they have to manipulate their circadian rhythm, so to speak. This is where melatonin may really help with people that have to like work third shift or whatever, because you can help reset that circadian rhythm. But if you're going to do that, you still need plenty of sleep, and you still need to make sure that you forego the TV and all that stuff. Like you come home straight away and go to sleep. I remember I worked third shift once, and it's miserable to do that.
Yeah.
I worked from 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. And if you don't go home and go right to sleep, and lights
Left.
out and everything,
Yeah.
it's rough. So a lot of these people, are coming home, eating, and then they get caught in front of TV, and then they may not go to sleep around 11, and their circadian rhythms off, and based on that, they can't go to sleep, and they may get 2 or 3 hours here, and so their sleep is very fragmented, and over time it just creates problems.
Right.
A lot of problems. So it's just not an ideal situation. And here's what you're doing, Brian. You're fighting our evolutionary past when you do that. And that's a failed fight. You're going to lose every time. every
Right.
single time. So it's no wonder people like this have higher rates of diabetes, cancer, and all these other things. So it's very important to do what you can to improve that.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to branch off that a little bit if I can and ask about kind of sleep debt. So I'm going to go back to my example of working. If I work 4 or 5, 6 days in a row, maybe I start out, Keoni, the first night, I get 8 hours of sleep. I'm doing well. Things start to get away from me Wednesday, Thursday, and I'm getting maybe towards the end of the week, 6.5 hours or something like that. And then I come back to bed Friday. I don't work Saturday and I sleep 10, 12 hours. Did I restore kind of what I lost there, or how does that equation work out as well?
Well, I'd like to tell you that you did, but the research does not say that. You can never restore, you can never pay back all your sleep debt, unfortunately. And that really was eye-opening for me.
Yeah, I've heard different
So,
things. So I've heard that you could
yeah.
also, like, it's in, a handful of days, like 3 or 4 days, not necessarily a week where you could pay off your sleep debt. But you're saying what you're seeing is that there's really no way we can pay it off.
You get
Even
some back. You do pay some debt back, no doubt about it. But once you've lost some of it, you're still behind the finish line.
mm,
No matter if you get good night's sleep for the next month or so. So it's important to get that sleep now
yeah,
and keep doing it. And it's important to start children off with getting appropriate sleep. I mean, we're talking about real health consequences here, where this may be a big part of, children not being able to focus in school. I mean, think about children and having to get up early and being pulled out of bed who aren't getting sleep. I mean, really, do you expect them to really focus on school?
oh,
When
absolutely.
it's like, it's ridiculous the way our society is set up around sleep. We set up our society without even taking really any of the evolutionary aspects of sleep. And the more we know about sleep, the more we realize how important it is. And there's studies on pushing back school times and what it does for academic achievement for children. And they've started doing this in Europe, and the United States is slow to take this on, but there are some schools that are. And it significantly improves academic performance. And not only it just improves learning capability, it improves brain maturation. I mean,
Right.
it just goes on and on and on.
Yeah,
So
we're slow to adopt the common sense here, Keone. My middle school started at 7:25. Started.
I think that's when I started too. And
It
that's
means
an
I was on
awful
the bus at
age.
6:30 as
Yeah,
a
yeah,
as a
yeah.
14, 15-year-old.
Well, I talked to a parent the other day, one of my patients, she has to wake her child up at 5:30 to get her to school. She buses she carpools the kid across the county line to another school.
Yeah.
It's craziness. And so that's part of the reason why I really want to talk about, sleep and how to get people to just really take heed of it. Because if people got appropriate sleep, we're talking about significant healthcare savings, significant health giving effects
Yeah.
to do this. So yeah, unfortunately, getting back to your question, sleep debt, don't put yourself in debt because it's hard to get back out of it. It's just hard.
Spoken like Dave Ramsey. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it's just, you're just
Keone doesn't
not
know who
gonna.
that is either.
Yeah, I'm not sure who that is. Maybe it's the age gap we have. I don't know.
Uh,
Anyway, we'll talk. Maybe we could talk about him on another podcast. Anyway, so I want to talk a little bit about melatonin. So what does melatonin do? It basically tells the body when it's dark outside. Okay, so you can use melatonin to manipulate your circadian rhythm to some extent. It's analogous to a 100-meter sprint where melatonin is a starting gun, but it is not a sleep agent where it actually helps you go to sleep. It's like the gun that gets the sprint started, but it's not actually helping the sprint.
yeah, kind of
You know what I'm saying?
kickstarts the cascade of everything
Yeah,
that you
kind of
want.
kicks. Yeah. So you need to take in to help your sleep. Don't just rely on melatonin. In fact, the studies show melatonin doesn't do a whole lot for people in, really people our age, your age, my age. It does the studies does show that it does have a significant benefit for older individuals, and it has a significant benefit for people who are flying across the country or to other countries and are maybe jet lagged.
And it is a hormone, correct?
It is.
So,
It is.
Keoni, is melatonin? Because I've heard conflicting evidence as far as melatonin. If if you consistently take it, it may decrease your own body's upregulation of it. Do you know of any studies that kind of point to that, or some
I'm not
safety
sure what
pointers?
I'm not sure what that specifically, but I will say this. Typically, that's the case with most hormones when you take them. Okay,
Yeah,
so I would assume that's melatonin, and that may be why one of the reasons why it doesn't really seem to help younger individuals. All right.
yeah.
As I know right now, there doesn't seem to be any like really bad harmful effects of melatonin. I will say this, most melatonin supplements that people buy over the counter are useless. They don't have a lot in there. So you really need to get, melatonin from a qualified person that, is used in reputable companies and stuff. So, and also with melatonin, when's the best time to take it? Well, you want to take it, if you're going to take it, you want to take it at the same time every night. So I see a lot of people when they take melatonin, they're like, oh, well, tonight I'm going to bed at 12, so I'll take it at 11. Oh, tonight I get to go to bed early. I'm going to go to bed at 9. I'm going to take it at 8. No, you need to take it to keep that rhythm in sync. You need to take it at the same time every night and go to bed at the same time. And usually it kicks in about a half hour after you take it. So if you're going to go to bed at 11, you should take it at 10, or if you're going to go to bed at 10, take it around 9. Yeah. And typically most doses you can get a lot of times if you're just taking it to help with sleep, 1 to 3 milligrams. Sometimes we'll go up to 10 milligrams, sometimes 20 milligrams of that stuff. So, let's talk about the types of sleep real quick. Something called NREM sleep and REM sleep. So most people have heard of REM sleep, right? Rapid eye movement, and
Yeah.
NREM sleep is non-rapid eye movement. And so typically within REM sleep, your eyes are moving all over the place. And in non-REM sleep, you don't really have that. REM sleep is basically the sleep where you're dreaming. And when you're dreaming, your body is completely catatonic. You're completely paralyzed. And what's really interesting about dreaming, as you know, is that your brain is basically hallucinating, and you're basically in a delusional, paralyzed state. Which, think about that, is actually from an evolutionary perspective. Well, it's scary, but from an evolutionary perspective, it's pretty neat, right? Because think about what's happening here. If you acted out your dreams, you probably would have been on this planet long. All right. Think about that. Like if you're dreaming that you're running and you're unconscious, you're probably going to run yourself into a wall.
Right.
If you're dreaming that you're flying and you're unconscious, but you can move around, I mean, what's going to stop you from jumping off a building to fly, like to actually do it? And what's crazy about this is some people, the older they get, lose this paralysis effect, and sometimes when they're dreaming will act out their dreams. So you've heard about people like punching or kicking and stuff like that. I mean, you take it to some extreme. Some people have really hurt other people, their spouse or whatever, because of this, because they're fighting somebody in a dream or whatever, which is crazy. But typically you're completely paralyzed. And so the NREM sleep is basically your deep sleep, and your REM sleep is your lighter sleep. And you can think about that. And we cycle through these like every 90 minutes. And typically we go about 4 to 5 cycles through of these. And at the beginning of the night, you typically get more deep sleep in proportion to REM sleep. And at the end of the night, you get more REM sleep in proportion to your deep sleep.
Can you kind of further flesh out like the difference between deep and, I get that REM is when we have the dreams, but so I guess tell me a little bit more about deep sleep specifically.
Okay, so let's start off with like just looking at the brain waves and what that means, looking at that, and then we'll talk about what they seem to do, what science seems to say that both of these do. But the key function seems to be like NREM sleep or deep sleep works on the brain and like weeding out and removing unnecessary neuronal connections. So it and then the REM sleep like strengthens neuronal connections. So a good analogy for this is basically think about a sculptor with a block of granite. Let's think about Michelangelo doing his statue of David, right?
Mm-hmm.
And how do you start? You like take out big chunks of block, and then you put detail in them, and like finalize it, and significantly strengthen these neuronal connections. So deep sleep is like trying to get the shape, and then NREM sleep is trying to get the shape, and then REM sleep is kind of trying to get the detail.
That kind of
But
makes
from the
sense with the
brain,
dreaming.
yeah, it's like integration and helping put these neuronal connections together. Um, and we'll talk about that more, because it's just fascinating. And a lot of this is like some recent research. Um, and the sleep research is, the more we know, the more we realize how important it is. But as far as brain waves go, when you look at brain waves, when people are in an awake state, they just look erratic. There's no rhythm to them. And then when you look into like NREM or deep sleep, all of a sudden the brain waves become synchronized and slow down and have a rhythm and pattern to it. And then when you switch back into REM sleep, they become erratic again. And that makes sense, right? Because if you're in REM sleep, you're basically, it's a waking sleep state, right? Because you're dreaming. Your brain thinks whatever you're dreaming is happening. You're hallucinating these things. So your brain has all that activity in it, but it's erratic. It's analogous. Think about it being analogous to a football stadium, or to a huge stadium, right? Where you're sitting in that stadium and you're trying to pick out like one person across stadium to hear what they're saying. There's no way you can do it. But if that stadium becomes synchronized with like, shouting a mantra or doing the wave, you can see what's going on. And that's like deep sleep.
Interesting. Okay.
When people are synchronized. Very interesting to me. Deep sleep, when somebody's deep sleep, the deep sleep signal is generated right at yin tong in Chinese medicine. Yin tong is right kind of in the middle of your forehead, or right about here, and that's your frontal lobe. The signal is generated from there, and it pulses from the front to the back of the brain. Pulses from the front back of the brain. And it's just interesting that it starts there, because in Chinese medicine, that's a very important point for sedation, for overall bringing all the other points into balance and stuff like that. It's just very interesting to me that deep sleep starts there. And also think about what your frontal cortex does. It's like it enables you to make rational decisions and to think through. It's your creativity. Yeah, it's your decision making thing. It's the last thing to mature for as we mature, and we see a lot of teenagers, and including myself, doing stupid things when they're teenagers. A lot of that has to do with the frontal lobe not being developed appropriately.
Yeah.
That's why you see a lot of teenagers driving down the road acting crazy on the road or whatever. It's their frontal lobe. And also it has to probably do with them not sleeping or not getting the full development of that. The frontal lobe is very dependent on sleep for proper development also.
Yeah.
I thought this was good. I think about the waking state as being receptive to all this information, and then the deep sleep state as being like the reflective part of it, like you reflect on what's going on, and then the REM state, the rapid eye movement state, being where it's now integrations. So reception wake state, deep sleep, the reflection, REM sleep, the integration, where now you have all these interconnecting things happening, where you make a more accurate picture of how the world works in REM sleep. And with it, it brings new innovative insights and problem solving abilities, and then brings out your creativity and brings out your motivation and stuff like that. A lot of scientists, this is where magic seems to happen. A lot of creative individuals, artists, this is where things seem to happen. If you want to really get your creative centers back online, get plenty of sleep. So it's just fascinating what we're starting to find out what dreaming actually does for the body.
Yeah.
So you're really talking about like fascinating integration of things and how it can just bring things to the forefront.
What does Chinese medicine have to say regarding dreaming, Keoni?
Um, Gosh, they kind of the traditional Chinese uh, thought is it's very esoteric. It's some of it applies to science, but a lot of it just talks about like being a window into the future and stuff like that. And we just know that 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 is probably that's not the case. Or you can psychoanalyze it and try to find meaning, and that just doesn't bear out in the research.
Yeah.
um uh it can sometimes in Chinese medicine, it can reflect like what's actually going on with your chi. Is yin and yang in balance? Like, are you overly anxious where yang is overpowering yin? You can't relax enough. I mean, it can give you some insight there, but typically, we just didn't know what REM sleep was really until the 20th century, what it actually did, and what we're trying to find out here. And now in the 21st century, we're finding out more and more and really getting an idea of what it does to uh, help the brain and help us function in society as rational, creative beings that we are. you
Right.
know
Right.
um let's see here. This is let's talk about how we should sleep. um I find it interesting that I read some stuff in Western Europeans before the Industrial Revolution. There was this whole thing based on historical records where Western Europeans or Northern Europeans would do like two sleeps in a night, where they'd sleep for like 4 hour chunk, and then they'd be up in the middle of the night and be awake, and then they go back to sleep for another several hours. And then you look at kind of hunter-gatherer tribes, and what you find is they tend to sleep with the moon, get up with the sun, and you don't see that so much that biphasic pattern that some people talked about in Europe. It is interesting. Some of the things that we do know is for humans, sleep does tend to be monophasic, meaning that it tends to be straight through the night for the most part. It's not broken up. But what's interesting is there does seem to be maybe possibly a biphasic pattern, whereas you sleep through the night and then there's actually a lull and almost like an afternoon type lull where the body wants to sleep again. So you see this in Europe, especially in Southern Europe, where they have actually what's called siestas. So you may see this in like Greece or Italy. And what's very interesting about this is since the Western influence or the American influence on Europe or vice versa, people are starting to do away with that siesta. And what's really interesting is a study out of Harvard where once the siesta was abandoned in Greece, you started seeing an increased risk of heart disease over a 6-year period from that, which is fascinating.
Yeah.
That's crazy. Going back to from an evolutionary perspective, we talked about that across everything that's been looked at, all animals sleep. Even migrating birds that migrate, and they'll sleep on the wind. They'll take turns sleeping, or where some animals like dolphins will actually sleep with half the brain will go to sleep, and then the other half brain will go to sleep, so they can constantly be somewhat semi-conscious and breathe while they're in the water. It used to be thought that sharks don't sleep, they constantly have to move. Well, a lot of animals have to keep moving, especially if you're an aquatic animal, but all animals, including sharks, do have to sleep. And they do this in various ways of either shutting off the brain one half or the other. And it's just very fascinating. Talking about REM sleep with humans, what we find is our ancient ancestors slept in the trees, right? And so in our evolutionary history, our ancient ancestors slept there. And think about what REM sleep does if you are in the trees, right? So for example, if you go into REM sleep and you completely become paralyzed, it seems like your risk of falling out of sleep is greatly increased, right? Like you just roll off a branch or whatever,
Right.
you know? Um, so it's very interesting that there's some thought that based on us moving and becoming more terrestrial sleepers, that we significantly increased our REM sleep compared to other primates. And that this REM sleep, and think about what we just talked about, REM sleep, increasing neuronal connections, increasing our creativity, helping us make appropriate decisions, helping build and making our brain more efficient. I mean, we're talking about something, the fact that we went from trees to be a terrestrial lifestyle and sleeping on the ground may be one of the reasons that has set us apart from other animals as far as our creativity. And, we're the only species on this planet that's gone to the moon. Our technology that we have, a lot of it probably has to do with our sleep. And it's very interesting. We actually sleep shorter than all primates, but what we do is we get more quality rather than quantity. So we get more quality deep sleep and definitely more quality REM sleep than our primate ancestors and
Hmm.
our primate brothers and sisters, as you will, that are currently living now. So REM sleep seems to have set us apart from other mammals, and it's given us a degree of like sociocultural complexity. It's given our cognitive intelligence. It recalibrates, fine tunes our emotional circuits, helps us overcome our primitive emotions and our irrationality. It gives us our emotional intelligence. So, what does this say about not getting enough sleep? I think, it's paramount that we really focus on this. And as healthcare providers, you're being a doctor of physical medicine, physical therapy, right? It's like, if you want to really help heal your patient, yeah, okay, you can show them how to move and how to, therapeutic exercise, therapeutic things that you can do for them. But really, the thing that's really going to help get that ball rolling is making sure that they sleep appropriately and in a way that doesn't require pharmaceutical intervention, which can actually inhibit sleep, which we'll talk about later
Yeah,
in another
absolutely.
podcast.
I would kind of add to that. And I've heard this saying before. I wouldn't necessarily say it's 100% true, but while you're sleeping is really the only time you're anabolic. It's the only time you're not catabolic, you're not breaking down, you're not being active. And specifically speaking on like physical therapy or patient healing or as a strength coach, when you're working out, all that is catabolic, all that is breaking down, all that is destructive to your body. The actual
Mm-hmm.
benefit is coming from when you're sleeping and repairing all those like the cell breaking that you did, all that kind of stuff, all the damage that you did. The good damage
Mm-hmm.
that you did while you were working is repaired and treated in your sleep. So
Right.
there's only so much you can
Yep.
do awake to facilitate that healing.
Right, right. And the main organ that is significantly influenced by that is your brain, right? And that's probably why one of the best things you can do to prevent dementia and prevent that cellular garbage accumulating and the breakdown and clearing out the trash out of all your cells is with sleep. So that's what you're talking about, the catabolic. I mean, sleep is restorative. It's the most anti-aging, best detox thing that you can do. Before we end, because I know this question is going to come up and we will get to it, but I just wanted to just talk about how sleep differs across human lifespan, right? So in utero, prior to birth, um, basically in utero, you're like in a REM-like sleep state, and you get random bursts of activity, muscular activity, and your body, the being in utero, you're in a should be in a very safe environment, right? So basically, from an evolutionary perspective, it doesn't matter if you're not catatonic or completely limp when you go into REM sleep, but REM really helps. Both types of sleep really help the brain, but REM really helps, create neuronal connections and things like that. And it's very interesting in utero that there's a lot of REM sleep going on. So the parent, the mother or the father who feels the baby kick, the baby's actually not awake and is not responding to you. The baby's actually, in an unconscious state, but going through REM constantly and helping develop itself and its brain. The last few weeks of right before birth, significant amounts of REM sleep activity are occurring in the brain, up to 9 to 12 hours happen there. So it helps with brain maturation. The interesting thing about this, women who drink or who have alcohol or have alcoholics, are alcoholics, you get significant amounts of decreased REM sleep, which affects the brain maturation and activity well into life. And these kids are set significantly behind. Even the occasional drinking, having one drink or two a night can have significant impact from what we're seeing. This even goes for nursing moms. A nursing mom who has a blood alcohol level of 0.08 will give a 0.08 alcohol content to their child through breast milk. And it significantly decreases the REM sleep activity, which then causes the brain to have abnormal synapses, abnormal synaptogenesis. So the brain just does not develop appropriately, and then you also don't get appropriate secretions of melatonin. So it's a very important thing to do. And I would even say to moms and stuff that we also see that effect with caffeine. So that may be another thing. So everything the mom takes into her body, the baby in utero is taking that, or the nursing baby is also taking that, and it can really affect maturation. Children, infants, young kids, they are actually naturally polyphasic sleepers to the chagrin of their parents, right? They'll sleep for a little bit and then they're up, and then they'll sleep for a little bit and then they're up, and this can go on all night. And then you look at the mom and dad with, a baby that does this, who's screaming or crying or whatever at all these off hours a night, really affects the sleep of the parents. But that is normal sleeping pattern for a baby. Once you get into like late childhood, then they move into this monophasic type sleep pattern where they'll sleep, tend to sleep continuously. And this usually occurs after like the age of 4 or whatever. And then with adolescents and teenagers, me and you been there, have done that. We know how that is, right? That circadian rhythm shifts forward a few hours. So you tend to go to bed a lot later and you tend to want to sleep later. And it's very interesting, like, why would the body naturally do this? It seems to be like an evolutionary test where the fledgling is testing out, leaving the nest, so to speak, by staying up later when the parents are actually asleep. So they get to play and get to do what they need to do. But basically they have 2 hours to live the adult life. So I find that a fascinating theory. But for adolescents and teenagers, since their circadian rhythm is shifted forward a few hours, and then you have early school start times, that's extremely detrimental, right? So you're actually going to bed late, you want to sleep later, but you have to get up earlier, right? So you're significantly sleep deprived. Frontal lobe doesn't develop as well as it should. And you lose deep sleep and REM sleep. And the main thing for brain maturation is a combination of getting good deep sleep and REM sleep and good, REM, rapid eye movement sleep. So, and then last but not least, older individuals. There's a big myth out there that says older individuals need less sleep. That is absolutely not true. They need just as much sleep. The problem is a lot of their sleep is fragmented based on medications they may be taking, based on a weak bladder. So you have to work on all that stuff, and that stuff can significantly help improve their sleep. So,
how about differences between men and women, Keoni, for sleep needs?
I'm not aware of any there. I'm sure there are some differences. It's fascinating because you think about sleep where humans move to more of a terrestrial. We're no longer sleeping in the trees, or hominids move to more terrestrial type sleeping on the ground. And then sleeping in groups. I think that may play a role between the differences of men and women. You would think, women would be kind of at the nest or the campsite. The men or group of men would be there to protect them. So maybe they can have more sleep. I definitely would say this. It does certainly seem like women tend to mature, at least developmentally in the brain, quicker than men. That may have something to do with them naturally getting more sleep, or it may just have them being more of the rational gender than men, at least at least early on,
Yeah.
maybe for the rest of our lives, as we can see from the leaders in our world, to tend to do better. But it's an interesting question. I don't really know the answer to that. I don't know if that's really been looked at.
So me and my girlfriend were debating about it for a while because she sleeps like a baby and I do not.
Well,
So,
it's interesting you say that. Jillian sleeps like a baby, sleeps much more than I do. That's for sure. And that may be self-imposed on men. I think men like carry a lot more stress or bury it more so than women, and hide it more. I think men carry a big weight on their shoulders about being a breadwinner and all that stuff, and if they're not doing that, it creates a lot of stress in their life, and that can affect their sleep. I think there's a lot of things that play into that. And again, it may just go back to, at least for me, my partner is just very, she doesn't, she's more rational with her stress. Let me just put it that way. And therefore maybe she just sleeps better.
Yeah, same here.
Yeah. So, it's like if something bad is happening, it's like, well, let's put it in perspective, whereas I may be, no, the world's ending tomorrow. I know this, that type of thing. And actually we do that. And I think, again, that may have to do with not getting enough sleep, where you create these worst case scenarios that you don't need to create.
Yeah. When I was researching it, I saw basically the differences in sleep need between the two genders is more or less nominal, or is more or less negated. But it was like 20, 30. And this was, PubMed studies, but like 20 or 30 minutes difference where women needed more sleep.
Yeah, that's very interesting. And then it would be interesting to look and see, like, is there a difference between NREM sleep and REM sleep between men and women?
Yeah.
That would be fascinating to look at, or is there a difference between melatonin secretions between men and women? How does light affect it? But anyway, let's end there, because I know we've gone over. Thank you guys, if you're listening to this, for hanging on with us for an hour. I know these podcasts are hard enough for people to stay on, so hopefully you stayed on. But we'll keep talking about sleep for a while. And if you listen to our sleep podcast and just email us and let us know, we will send you in a few weeks natural ways. I think it's like a 10 to 20 bullet point thing, natural ways to help your sleep, which we'll get out there. But
awesome. Next week I want to hear your routine, Keoni, how you get a good night's sleep going.
Okay. Yeah, we'll talk about it. We got a lot more to go with the sleep stuff. And by the way, a lot of there's a number of good sleep books out there, but the one where I got most of this information from is called Why We Sleep by Matthew Walker. So check it out. And we'll there's some others that we'll give you as we talk about sleep. All right. So
awesome. Everybody be well.
Be well and have a good night's sleep.
I think we need to do an episode, Keoni, where I just show you random things on the internet and get your reaction, like 2 Chainz and different viral videos that you've never seen.
You need to. I need to get up to speed